joining us in studio this morning from Bristol Law Office, Matt Bristol with us. Good morning, Matt. How you doing today?
Good, Mike. How are you today?
Doing great. For folks who aren't familiar, Matt with as an attorney with Bristol Law Office joins us once a month, and we always talk sage legal advice here. And a lot of it's family, a lot of planning, a lot of that type of preparing for the future type things. You know, what kind of things should you do in terms of legal wise to protect you and your family, or to ensure things happen the way you want them to happen. So that's a lot of our discussion.
Good to plan ahead.
Yeah.
Got to have a plan.
Yeah. I mean, and of course, you know, life always throws curveballs and things.
Oh, yeah.
So when you have to navigate those things in life, then Matt usually gives you information that at least helps mitigate the most problematic issues from happening to you if you prepare on those.
Well, we do our best. So you got to plan your work and work your plan.
Exactly. And then really, and to be honest, if you listen to some of the stuff or most of the stuff that Matt talks about, he's kind of putting himself out of business a little bit. I mean, if you think about it. Fortunately, there's a lot of people that don't listen, so he'll never run out of business. But if you do listen, you may not need to visit Matt so much down the road, or get the expensive version of Matt where it's a lot of time in a courtroom and things like that.
Well, I'm always surprised that no matter how much stuff we cover here, that sure enough, somebody comes in the next week and they have no clue. we need to expand our listenership or something.
There we go. We need to slip it into places where people don't, normally. It's like, yeah, you know me on the radio, but maybe I can hack your toaster or something. So every time you turn on
There you go.
Well, last time we were talking, and
talk about community property stuff.
Yeah,
that's kind of a broad subject. It affects every aspect of our lives here in a community property state.
Mm-hmm.
So there are only 8 community property states in the country. Yeah. Each one's a little different, but basically it's a Spanish custom.
Okay, so kind of your states that have some kind of Latin history behind it probably are going to lean more to these community property, like New Mexico,
Southwest United States,
California,
Texas. Yeah. A couple of states in the country have adopted it by statute.
Okay.
But mainly the southwestern part of the country where the Spanish came.
Okay.
So you're from back east.
Mm-hmm.
So by the time the Pilgrims arrived at Plymouth Rock, the Spanish had already been to the Mississippi River.
Yeah. That was an interesting lesson I learned when I went to Santa Fe for the first time and saw, if you've never done this, you should, but one of the oldest churches in the country are right there. And it's, 600 plus years old. Oh, yeah. And you're just like, oh, yeah, I thought I saw old stuff back east. And you don't think about that coming out here.
Yeah.
And while we're busy, while the popular history back east was being made, the people would be like, where you been? How you doing?
Yeah.
We've been here a while.
Been here a long while. And you notice the Spanish built missions in the Southwest to convert the Indians, but the English never did.
Yeah, it's true. You never think about that.
English never tried to convert the Indians.
And and now that's why you have such a large Catholic, that heritage in this area because of that Spanish influence. So. Yeah. Interesting. So if you're wondering why we're community property, it's that Spanish influence.
It's the Spanish influence.
Yeah.
So in this community property law, everything after the date of marriage is 50-50. So anything pre-marriage is called sole and separate. It's yours, period. Anything acquired after the date of marriage is both y'all's. It's 50-50, regardless of whose name is on it.
Mm-hmm. It's split down the middle because it was obtained together.
Obtained together.
Yeah.
Now, the exception would be if after marriage you obtained it by gift or inheritance, then that's considered sole and separate. That's 100% yours. It's not 50-50.
So it's kind of like, for example, your parents give you individually a check for $1,000 and say, "Here's that money is
this
your
for
money.
You. Yeah,
that's not earmarked for the marriage."
Right.
Gotcha.
So the date of marriage is the big date. So some people say, well, we've been together for, 15 years. It's like, sorry, it's the date of marriage and that's it.
Gotcha.
So that's what we look at. It doesn't matter how much time you're together before that. It's the date of marriage, and that's all
Once
we look
you
at.
sign the legally binding contract that you're together, everything before that is not relevant to that history,
It's
at least legally.
Yeah, the sole and separate is
Yeah.
not community. Now, maybe there was a business partnership if you went 50-50 on a house.
Gotcha.
But that would be more like a partnership.
Yeah, any other legal agreements you made together, those are still binding. But as far as non-legal binding agreements, not relevant in the eyes of the law.
Date of marriage.
Yeah.
So, and I still have people come in, speaking of people not listening to the show, and they say, well, maybe they're looking at bankruptcy, and they say, well, no, those are my wife's bills. She needs to file bankruptcy, but not me. And I'll ask, oh, okay, well, how long you been married? Oh, 20 years. So those debts were made during the marriage? Oh, yeah. Well,
They're
guess
yours
what?
now.
They're half yours.
Mm-hmm.
Well, but my name's not on them. Doesn't matter whether your name's on it or not.
If she defaults on it, they're not going to go after you to get the money from it.
That's right. And so I run across that on a regular basis well, my name's not on them. I don't owe them. Well, yeah, you do. So that's kind of one of the dangerous things about marriage, and people need to discuss before they get married is, how do people spend their money? How do people use credit cards? Because, if your spouse could have 6 credit cards you don't know about, and you're stuck paying them.
The only way that now how does that work for? So let's say one of the parties is married, or one of the parties has the bankruptcy going before. I mean, does that, if they're going through bankruptcy while the process of being married, does that bankruptcy carry into the marriage, or is that still a separate issue because that was a debt incurred by an individual prior to the contract of marriage being signed?
Wow, that was a convoluted question.
But does it make sense what I'm saying? Like, say they're in the process of going through the bankruptcy, or the one person is.
Actually, they're married or not married?
They're not married. One's going through a bankruptcy, or one's dealing with bankruptcy.
So they're single individuals.
And then they get married, and one's still in the process of that. Does the other incur that bankruptcy, or is it still separate because that was incurred before the marriage?
So we got 2 single individuals.
Yes.
And one is going through a Chapter 7 typically only lasts about 90 days.
Okay.
So it doesn't last a whole lot of time.
Okay. Well, maybe it was one of these weird Vegas,
Yeah. So most people wait till after the 90 days to get married.
I know, but some people aren't smart.
Some people are not. They're in love.
Exactly.
Okay.
And love makes you do really dumb things sometimes.
Okay, so they get married during the middle of the process before it's finalized.
Yes.
Okay. So because the debtor spouse incurred those debts pre-marriage, those are sole and separate debts.
So they can't go after the spouse.
So they cannot go after the spouse. It's just like if a couple marries and one of them brings in a bunch of student loans student loans are pre-marriage, then the spouse is not liable for those pre-marriage debts.
Okay.
Because those debts were incurred pre-marriage.
Well, what if it's just credit card or a household income debt that they had prior to marriage? Does that get absorbed into the marriage?
No.
Okay.
Any debt pre-marriage belongs to solely to that spouse, to that person.
Gotcha.
The second spouse is not liable for the pre-marriage debts of the other spouse.
Got you. So and that won't impact credit scores. I know now we're getting out of legal world, but that's where I'm kind of curious. So I wonder how that impacts credit scores and things. It's like my wife or my husband got the one with the bad credit, and they incurred that into the marriage, but they still have bad credit in the marriage. Does that start attacking my credit?
Well, once you're married, a lot of that stuff is going to be reported jointly.
Gotcha. So that's where I was kind of curious too, on the legal standpoint.
Yeah, because both husband and wife go to apply for a mortgage loan, they're going to run credit on both of them. Mm-hmm. So there may be some effect there. So sometimes we see that, and as a result, just one spouse ends up qualifying for the mortgage loan, and they leave the other spouse off. So they do a sole and separate property agreement where the wife has the good credit. Then she gets the mortgage loan. The house is in her name only. Husband signs a sole and separate property agreement that it's her house, not his, because his credit was too bad.
Gotcha.
So sometimes we see that. And a lot of people are concerned about their credit scores, and they say, well, But, I had this, 750 credit score and I don't want to file bankruptcy. And I'm saying, well, if you're talking to me about bankruptcy, chances are
You don't have a 750 score.
Not anymore.
Yeah.
You're about to lose it.
Because to go to bankruptcy, you've had to default on some payments and things, and people that miss payments don't have 750 credit score.
Right. And so a lot of people, in my mind, put a misemphasis on credit scores.
Sure.
Because that means you owe a lot of people and all your payments are on time, but it means you owe a lot of people, and that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
And so I talk about rehabilitation with my bankruptcy clients. And so we do a budget that's required for all cases. And part of the budget is, well, you get to have, say, $200 a month in savings for car repair. That's legit. You can have $100 a month in home repair savings. And clothing, birthday stuff. So you allowed a savings account because in theory in the bankruptcy court, from now on, everything's cash. So if there's a car repair, you have the cash and savings.
Gotcha.
Or home repair, you have the cash and savings.
You're not reestablishing credit. You're paying as you go.
Pay as you go.
Yeah.
Get you off the credit cards. But if you save like that $400 a month and you do it for 25 months, that's just 2 years. That's $10,000 in the bank.
And now you got a new nest egg to start over.
Plus 2 tax refunds. Well, if you got 10 grand in the bank, what do you need? You can't pay cash for.
Yeah.
Just about. So with that much money, do you really care what the credit score is anymore?
No. But if you're smart, you're using this to reestablish and come up with a foundation that's going to work this time.
Yeah, so hopefully, if you have to use the credit card for new tires, then you've got the cash to pay for it in savings, or if you have to get a new washer, you put it on the credit card, but you have enough cash in savings to pay the card off, and that will help rehabilitate.
I'm curious, not because I never thought about this, but when one files for bankruptcy and things, like you said, they go through these, but is there any mandatory, you must go to some classes? Is there any requirements on that saying you must learn how to balance a budget? If not, we're going. Is there any mandates on someone that goes through bankruptcy to go to classes or go learn how to balance a checkbook?
Well, and that's a good question, and the answer is yes.
Okay,
and I just kind of skip over that sometimes because I do all this all the time. There's a pre-bankruptcy counseling class.
Okay.
And the first class is, do you really need a bankruptcy, or is Matt pulling your leg about stuff?
Gotcha.
And so that's the first class is there a way to pay these people back or not?
Okay.
And generally there's not. So you have to have that first class before you can even file. So once the bankruptcy is filed, there's a second class. It's called personal financial management. And all the clients that I talk to enjoy the class. They say they learned a lot.
Good.
It's about a 2-hour class. You can log in and out, but there's no way to shorten it. And it's stuff like need versus want.
Okay.
And I'm surprised at how many of my clients have never heard of that distinction. Don't know that they actually balance checkbooks, but it's about personal financial management and how let's not get into this a second time if we can avoid it.
Sure. Creating priorities and knowing when to say no and when to, what's like you said, a want versus a need.
Yeah. And so all the clients enjoy it. I probably need to take it one time just to know what it goes through, but that's probably something I've done personally for so long.
Sure. You just kind of
secondhand to me.
Yeah. It's just, nature to you. But I was just curious because I've never filed for bankruptcy or anything like that. And I was like, is there anything in place to say, you know what? All right, we're going to bail you out of this one, but we don't want to keep doing this. Learn something so the next time you make smarter choices.
See, even in bankruptcy, community property comes into play, or separate property comes into play. So if a couple's filing, they have to list all their community property as well as all their sole and separate property.
Okay.
Each individual ones. Well, sometimes only one spouse needs to file. And so people say, but all this, credit card debt is my wife's, only she needs to file. And I say, well, no, that's actually an asset question, not a debt question.
Okay.
So if the wife files, then she has to list all the community property of the parties and her sole and separate.
Gotcha.
But she can't list the husband's sole and separate property because she didn't have an interest in it. So what if he's got a gold mine?
Well, then he's got to do his own.
Well, if he's got a gold mine that's his sole and separate,
Mm-hmm.
that's not listed as an asset if she's the only one filing bankruptcy.
Gotcha. Because her name's not attached to
Her
that
name's
at
not
all.
attached to it.
Gotcha.
But she lists all the community property and her sole and separate. Doesn't list his sole and separate assets, file the bankruptcy. And you say, well, wait a minute, he didn't file. Can those credit card folks still come after him?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer is, yep, they can come after him. They can sue him, but they can't collect against any community property,
Okay.
which his paycheck is community property. They can't garnish.
Okay.
If they know about his sole and separate, they can go after it.
Interesting.
But her bankruptcy protects not only the community assets, but all future acquired community assets.
Okay.
So in 2 years, they get a new car. That's protected by her bankruptcy because it's community property.
So, like you said, they can sue,
Yep.
but
Can't
what's
collect.
the likelihood of them winning that lawsuit?
Oh, they can sue. They can get a judgment. They just can't collect against any community asset.
Gotcha. But, well, I guess what I mean is, like, say you've got, like, they can, in essence, sue to get that gold mine.
His sole and separate.
Yes, sole and separate.
Yes.
But are courts awarding them that gold mine, or are they most of the time allowing them to protect that? I mean,
No.
what's the way it's leaning generally is what I mean.
Oh, the law says that they can go. So it's the non-filing spouse.
But are judges allowing that, or are they mostly shutting that down?
No, they can go after the non-filing spouse's sole and separate.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. As long as it's not otherwise protected by some other law.
Gotcha.
So yeah,
Which odds are, if someone's smart, they probably have it covered under some other kind of.
well, most people really don't have sole and separate property.
Yeah.
You know, you get married and you broke.
It's
and
joint. I guess the one instance would be if that gold mine was a long family thing, and they're like, "Boy, that's yours, and no one else's," and
Well,
something like that.
Inherited from grandma.
Yeah, yeah.
Or oil and gas. And,
Yeah.
around here it'd be oil and gas. But, most creditors don't know that somebody's got an oil and gas interest.
Yeah.
And unless they put it on a loan application. And now again, this is wife's credit cards, and she made the application, so she probably didn't put down husband's oil and gas interest.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. So they can, so a judgment creditor can get a judgment against the non-filing spouse. They just can't collect against community property. And since there's only 8 community property states in the country, most creditors in other states, weren't familiar with that law.
Okay.
So we spent about 12 years educating them because they would sometimes come after the non-filing spouse. And so we had this Dear Dumbass letter. We'd say, yeah, you can sue this guy and you can get a judgment, but you can't collect against community property. And here's the New Mexico bankruptcy case that says you cannot.
Okay.
So we would actually give them the name of that case in the letter. And we'd send it like 2 or 3 times. Yeah, you can get a judgment, but you can't collect.
Sure.
Send about 3 times. And always recite the name of the case. Because if they tried to go after the community property, the non-filing spouse, the bankruptcy court's going to go what on them.
Gotcha.
Going to go all over them because you can't do that. And that violates the whole process of the bankruptcy court.
Gotcha.
Because you can't do that. So we give them 3, 4 heads up so that if they did do it, they'd be willful malicious in their conduct.
Gotcha. Real quick, and I don't know if this is just a lawyer thing, and when, like you said, you cite the case. Is that a reference for any judge that may want to take this case, and you say, go read this case first before you decide to entertain this? Is that kind of a message saying that?
It's a message to the judgment creditor
Sure.
that here's this decided case. This is the law in New Mexico.
Sure.
And you better go read it. And if you don't, then the court is going to hold you liable for being stupid.
Gotcha.
And not only were you stupid for not reading it, but if you had read it, you would have known better.
Mm-hmm.
And because you knew better and did it anyway, now you're an evil actor.
Gotcha. So I guess, but like I said, you're doing as much to notify the client here, but like say they did sue you on it and you go to court before a judge, is it, I mean, does that happen where if the lawyer misses that case and the judge isn't aware of it, does it happen even though, like, look, you reference, is that where the appeal process gets into play here? I'm just like, are you doing it as much to notify the client as to say to the judge, you better not entertain this because it's going to get overturned and here's why?
And that would be a different example.
Okay.
So in my example, I'm notifying the judgment creditor that the law is against them doing a particular act.
Gotcha.
So if they do that act, and then we sue them for the act, and the judge says, well, gee, how do we know they just didn't make an honest mistake about what they were doing? Because, Judge, I told them 4 times.
Gotcha.
And gave them the case that says you can't do this.
So you're just basically establishing the track record there.
Establishing the record of either the incredibly stupid and they should be punished,
sure,
or they knew better and did it anyway and should be punished.
Gotcha.
So, the judge doesn't want you, run to court at the very first instance of somebody made an honest mistake.
Yeah. In case you haven't noticed, they're backlogged on everything, and everything's, glacial in the court system.
Yeah.
So.
So it's like, okay, Mr. Bristol, did you even give these people a chance to fix it?
Gotcha.
Yeah, Judge, we gave them 4 chances. They did it anyway. But now your question was, in the courtroom, do we warn the judge he's about to make a mistake?
Yeah.
And the answer is you have to.
Okay.
So if you're in the courtroom and so the judge says, well, I don't know if I like that particular provision of the contract.
Mm-hmm.
You go, well, wait a minute, Judge. You really can't pick and choose.
Yeah, right. It isn't your say whether you like it or not.
You can't just rewrite this thing because you want to.
Sure.
So if you're going to appeal, if that's in the back of your mind, the law requires you say, wait a minute, Judge, for the record, you're about to make a mistake that's reversible error. So when you go up on appeal, you can say, on the record, I pointed out the mistake.
Gotcha.
If you don't point out the mistake and you go up on appeal, the appellate court can say, well, wait a minute, did you warn the trial judge?
So you're just as liable as the judge is at that point.
If you didn't warn the trial judge, then you don't get it on appeal. You have to point it out to the trial judge and give him time to correct the mistake.
Okay.
Dear Judge, for the record, I humbly point out that you may be making a reversible error.
Gotcha.
If you're going to pick and choose which parts of the contract you're going to enforce.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, so you have to make that record, and no judge wants to hear that stuff.
No.
So I had a case where somebody wanted to hold my client in contempt for not following the court order. It was a domestic case. My client lived in Texas. So they filed a motion to order to show cause while my client shouldn't be held in contempt. Set a hearing date, and we all show up in court. And so the other side says, yeah, we want to hold Matt's client in contempt. And I said, well, Judge, in order to do that, they have to personally serve my client with this motion and order. And they didn't. They just mailed it. And the judge says, well, but Mr. Bristol, you and your client are here today.
Mm-hmm.
I said, yeah, Judge. And that's what the court said. And so-and-so and so-and-so case. I cited the case, and that's what they said. The client wasn't personally served with show cause, but they showed up in court anyway. The court held them in contempt, and they were reversed. The trial court was dead wrong.
Wow.
In other words, if you do it, Judge, you're going to get reversed too.
Yeah.
So that was reversible error, Judge. And so I'm just looking at the judge like, I dare you.
Yeah. The judge catch wind after a while. They're like, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
And like there's no wiggle room.
Never mind.
No
Moving
wiggle
along.
room, yeah. But you have to point it out.
Sure. Gotcha.
But yeah, it's like there's no wiggle room here, Judge.
Even though if it is butt awkward sometimes.
Yeah. Just one of those things.
Yeah. But I guess, wrapping up this conversation here, the point of what we're making here is if you don't know these things, ask questions. When you assume something like this, that's going to bite you in the tail.
Community property affects probate. So separate affects probate. I mean, it affects all aspects of our life. Come ask ahead of time.
And again, having these conversations and talking about these things will save you headache down the road. I know it's not sexy. I know no one wants to talk about what if, but I'd rather you talk about it and never need to enact it rather than you never talk about it and then everything goes south and you really put a huge hampering on everything you've worked towards because you didn't dot an I or cross a T here.
It's either expensive to fix or now you can't fix it. Yeah. So come talk to us.
Yeah. So, and it doesn't cost, any money or hardly any money to have a conversation with Matt, depending on the work there.
It's a lot cheaper to have a conversation up front, believe me.
Yeah. So, if any of the stuff we talk about here and you're thinking, I don't know, maybe I need to, check out Matt's website, go to bristoloffice.com. You can schedule an appointment to have them call and have a conversation, and maybe it ends in that conversation. Mm-hmm. Maybe no, we need to come in my office and we need to do some more digging here. But yeah, either way, it's sure be nice to get a phone call and say, nah, you're covered. Just do this and you're done. Mm-hmm. And then you go on about your day.
And then you have peace of mind.
Yeah, because
then
the alternative is not a path you want to go down sometimes.
Nope. Sure. No. Yeah.
Yeah. So bristoloffice.com, you can check that out and get
an appointment. Give us a ring, 625-5284.
Yeah, absolutely. So we got some time for some fact fiction, some stuff here.
Okay. So you and Sean were discussing the rain this weekend, mm-hmm. and sometimes
lack thereof.
And sometimes you can see it fall, but it never hits the ground. There's a name for that.
Okay.
It's called Virga.
Virga.
From the word virgin.
Okay.
It doesn't go all the way. I kid you not.
Life is funnier than art sometimes, isn't it?
Those Romans were, Anyway, that's what's called Virga rain. Yeah.
Interesting.
Isn't that funny?
It is kind of funny. Yeah. So if next time you see that, well, I don't know. It depends on the circles you're sharing that with. But
And then, sometimes in our society, we talk about your soulmate, mm-hmm. your other half, and so where does that come from?
I don't know. I have no idea. I was trying to think of something, two sides of something, and I'm not.
In ancient Greek mythology, humans were originally both sexes, hermaphrodites.
Okay.
And so one day the human race pissed off the gods and they split them.
Okay.
And so now you spend the rest of your life looking for your other half, your soulmate.
Interesting. That's kind of romantic.
Well, how'd they come up with that to explain it? But that's how old the idea is.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. I feel like that should be a movie. No, I'm just kidding.
It's an interesting thought. Anyway.
Find the soulmate, something kind of nice.
But that's where that comes from.
Interesting.
The idea is that ancient, yeah.
Well, if you didn't find your soulmate and you need help, Matt can help there too.
That's right.
You thought you did. Turned out it wasn't. Someone else's better half.
Yeah, we see a lot of people divorcing their not better half.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
But if you've got more happier stuff, like you want to, set up trusts or set up, anything for the future of your children.
Or if you got minor children, we need to establish a guardian if anything happens to the parents.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness, yeah.
Or if you want to protect your own assets down the road and get your wills set up and things like that.
Yep.
I know there's a lot of quick fixes online to do that kind of stuff, but it's like anything else in life. You get what you pay for. Be careful if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. And
the online stuff, they don't tell you what they're not telling you. And that's the problem is they're not telling you what you don't know.
It's a false sense of security sometimes if you don't pay attention to what's going on there.
I've had people come in with fill in the blank wills. And they go, well, Grandma did this fill in the blank will. How's it look? And I'm like, well, New Mexico doesn't recognize handwritten wills.
So that's strike one.
So the fill in the blank part doesn't count.
Yeah. If you do your will like Mad Libs, probably not the best strategy. So
no.
Call Matt. bristoloffice.com. He can tell you the better strategy.
Yes, please. Look forward to it. Thank you, Mike, so much.
Anytime. Appreciate it, Matt. We'll see you next month here.
All
and hopefully we'll have some good stuff to talk about sometimes. I know we always talk about the what ifs, but maybe it'll be some good stuff. So
you bet.
Thanks, Matt. Stay warm or stay cool this week. That's easier said.
Stay safe. Yeah.